Good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday night hangout from Energion Publications. I'm Henry Neufeld, the owner of Energion, and I'm talking tonight with Bob MacDonald. He's the author of two books. The count is two as of today because the printer is ready to run out copies of the second, but the first is this one, which I'm holding up, Seeing the Psalter. Can't quite get it all into the screen there. And if you look this way, you'll realize that it's a fairly thick book. 8.5 by 11, so you're getting your money's worth when you order this one. And it's a good introduction to our talking with Bob tonight, because I've had any number of comments about this. People who aren't all that interested in the Hebrew and the technical side, of which there is quite a bit, are nonetheless interested in the poetry and the translations. And so that is just it's a wonderful book on that basis. We're talking and working toward the idea of having the Psalms translations available for those who like that separately. That's Seeing the Psalter, and the one that just is headed out from the printer right now, The Song in the Night, and I have the cover showing up here. According to the melody and the accents of the Hebrew text. Now, there are a lot of accents. Since I did Hebrew in both undergraduate and graduate school, did a lot of Hebrew, and we generally learn just, a few that are good punctuation markers, and of course, learning how to accent the text. So let's start here, Bob, with the question, what leads you to doing the incredible amount of work to work through understanding this as musical notation, which it is? What leads you to do that work? What's your goal?
Wow, is that ever a good question? The goal is always to try to come to some understanding of the text, but it's a dangerous goal in a way, because we really have to think about how we read and not just impose what we think our own understanding is on the text. And there are three techniques that I use for doing that. One was one that I highlight in Seeing the Psalter, and that is to concentrate on words in the Hebrew that repeat, because repeated words form patterns in the text that are really obvious. Like even in a single psalm, you might get a circular structure, but it can even have effects over two consecutive psalms, where one psalm uses maybe 5, 6, 7 words in a row, and the next psalm uses the same 7 words in reverse order. And you think, hey, what's going on here? Words I understand, and I hear them when they're repeated. So that's the first technique. The second technique is, as you mentioned, the use of the accents. Nobody knows where those accents came from. People think of them as being from the tradition called the Masoretic tradition. Masoret is just a word that really means tradition, in the first part of the first millennium of this era. And they thought of these accents as being, as you said, punctuation. And some of them don't go too far wrong when you're thinking in terms of punctuation. Some of them have a pausal aspect to them, like a comma or a semicolon or even a period. And it might be one or it might be the other. It's not necessarily just that. And some of them also have a very strong separation of the parts. One of those looks sort of like a hat. It's a V with the point at the top of it called the atina. And when you look at it and rediscover the music behind these signs, it turns out that that one is a cadence on the subdominant, to use musical terms. And the best way for me to show you what that means is to sing it. So for instance, if da is my tonic note, the note where when I come back to it, I feel I'm at home. Ya ta 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 is the subdominant. And when you come to the subdominant, there's a rest. And there always is a rest in the text on the subdominant if a verse goes to the subdominant. And it's quite fascinating. The repeated words, the music gives shape to the whole verse. And then you can also use the more famous technique, which is called parallelism, especially in Hebrew poetry, which is a kind of rhyming ideas rather than rhyming sounds. But the parallelism, although it's important, and there are many, many different kinds of parallelism, not two or three, as some people say. There's so many variations. Sometimes one part of it's left out but implied, and sometimes they're similar things, and sometimes they're contrasting things. But the parallelism really takes second place to repeated words and the shape of the music. And the best way to do the shape of the music is actually for me to sing something, which may be a little bit painful. Do you have any questions there, Henry, before I pick an example?
I have a question, but I want it to wait until after you sing because it's on a tangent a little bit. So why don't we do this? I think you have the music on your screen, and I'm going to switch us to that. Okay.
Okay,
and then you can sing.
And you can see the screen that I'm looking at?
Well, in a moment, yes. Now they'll be able to see the screen that you're looking at on your computer.
Okay.
With Psalm 18.
Yep, it's Psalm 18. And
okay.
I picked a little section, verse 20. You can see the 20 up here. Can you see where I'm pointing my cursor?
Yes, we have that. We
20,
see that.
21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So it's a very little section of Psalm 18. Now, do I disappear from the frame if I turn and look here?
Well, you don't, since we're only showing your computer screen, you're,
okay.
Other than in miniature down at the bottom in your icon, you're not part of it.
Okay. Now, how would I do this? First of all, I'm going to sing it to you in Hebrew. And then we'll see if we can put some English words to it. So I'm picking a note. That's my tonic note. Vayotzieni lamechad yetzediki chachayt bi yigmeleni Adonai ketzitki kevod yadai yeshiv li ki shamarti darkei Adonai ולא לעצר רשעתי מאלוהי כי כל משפטיו לנגדי וחוקותיו לא אסיר ממני ויהי תמים עמו וישמר מעווני Vayashev Adonai. Whoops, I gotta go up a bit. Vayashev Adonai lik ketziki kevor yadai leneged einav. Well, I'm sure that's a little bit mystifying initially. It's quite long for one thing. I haven't started with this piece before. I've often done a shorter piece like David's Lament over Absalom, which everyone can hear because it's got far fewer words. But here you can still you can hear the movement to the rest in the middle of each verse. Let me sing a bit of it in English. He has brought me out into a spacious room. There we are on the subdominant. He will rescue me, for he delighted in me. Yahweh will reward me for my righteousness. Again, we come to the subdominant and the rest in the middle of the verse. Of my hands he will turn to me. And another thing I'd like to point out there is verse 25 comes back to the same words as we just had in verse 21. And Yahweh turns to me for my righteousness. Can you hear the similarity of those two? And they also are similar repeated words. You get the tzedek, my righteousness, in both cases. So that gives you an illustration of how repeated words and musical structure match each other.
Okay. Do you want to stay on your screen right now or on you?
I was just thinking I would point out something else, but I can't find it at the moment. So just as well if I don't.
Okay. I would like to ask a couple of questions. I mean, we have a half-hour program, so there's going to be a lot we're not going to talk about. And which, let people know here, that gives you a good reason to buy the book, The Song in the Night, which is now shipping. By the way, if you can buy it by the end of the day tomorrow, it will still be on pre-order pricing, right? The retail is $17.99, pre-order is $12.59, and that ends at midnight tomorrow night. Central Time, I believe, is the way my computer program runs the end of it. So that's how you can find out more about this. But a question that really I think spans a little bit across Seeing the Psalter and The Song in the Night. You talk about how successive psalms show a pattern, like the same order of words occurring in one and then in reverse order in the next, which you have in Seeing the Psalter. So what a lot of people say or teach about the Psalms is this is more or less a collection. You know, you look for the Zitzim Leben, wherever the Psalm was used originally, and that's where you get the meaning. Now, what you're saying here, if I hear correctly, and maybe you can expand on this, is there is meaning in the collection and not just the pieces.
Absolutely. And one characteristic that I saw at one point, you'll excuse me while I open another file here, the fifth book of Psalms in Seeing the Psalter. I want to make sure I get this right. So you might remember the Psalm when Israel came out of Egypt, Psalm 114. And the next Psalm, they're both very famous, Psalm 115, not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to your name give the glory. That particular Psalm, 105, does not begin on the tonic. It begins on a high C, one note above the fifth. And implicitly, when a verse begins on a note that is not the tonic, it is connecting that verse to what went just before. I have dozens of examples of this in the book. Now, why would, when Israel came out of Egypt, Psalm 114, be immediately connected to Psalm 115, as if to say, you should always sing these two Psalms together? Because immediately that we have this joy of Israel coming out of Egypt, we have the reminder, non nobis Domine, not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory. You see how important it is to make that connection. There are many, many, many other connections in the Psalter, and Seeing the Psalter attempts to show some of those connections through the patterns of repeated words that are used. There are other people, other scholars who have taken on this job as well. It seems to have come out over the last 20 or 30 years since the work of one scholar by the name of Wilson and others building on him, that there's something to the organization and the editing process that went into collecting the Psalms that is very important. And I can assure you, it is a completely coherent story, beginning with the praises of David in Book 1, dealing with the laments in Book 2 and 3, coming from the exile, and then Book 4, the recapitulation, appealing to Moses. Book 4, beginning at Psalm 90, and going to Psalm 106, really is a book that is framed by the repetition of Moses. And then Book 5, where praise begins early towards the end of Book 4 and continues unabated to the very end of the Psalms all the way through Book 5. And there are very important connections to what appears to be a child's game in the Psalter. There are 4 acrostics in the first book, each one of them incomplete. There are 4 in the 5th book, each one of them complete. And they mimic or remind us of the 4 acrostics that are in the Book of Lamentations. And if you look at the poems that precede those acrostics, they form a grand chiasm, the shape of an X, superimposed upon the entire Psalter, making it one big tent. It's really a remarkable collection of poems, very, very carefully put together from many sources, as early as maybe the 5th century before the Common Era, or perhaps as late as the 3rd century, but large chunks of it are in that order in the evidence that we have. But it's exciting that we can just read it without having to read all the special little marks in strange languages that we don't understand, and still see that overall structure of the story and our place in it. And that, again, I build on in the Song in the Night, as I tell the story of the whole Bible, using the music as a framework to move from one part of the story to the next.
Yeah. That's an important point to make sure people understand. The Song in the Night is not just about the Psalter. Seeing the Psalter is dealing with the Psalter. The Song in the Night covers a great deal of material in a framework.
Yeah, let me give you another example, because I think the example of David's lament. Oh, there's so many examples. You can keep me singing here all night, you know. What is David's lament? Let me find it. Oh. I know I've got it in here somewhere. Okay, here it is. It's 2 Samuel 19 in the Hebrew Bible. I think it's 2 Samuel 18 something or other in the English Bibles. I'll sing it to you in English. How about that?
Yeah, I'm going to switch people to your screen, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I've got to switch to your screen. Go ahead.
And the king shuddered, and he went up to the upper chamber over the gate, and wept. And thus he said as he wept, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would he had given death to me instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son. Well, the voice has to break when you're singing something that amazing. It is, where did these notes come from? You know, some of your listeners might be asking, did you make all that up, Bob? No, I didn't. I didn't make a single note up, not a single one of them. They come from the accents in the text as interpreted by a very well-defined key discovered by and inferred by the French organist and pupil of Marcel Dupré, Suzanne Hayek-Ventura, in the last century. And it's as if she has swung the axe, hit a very difficult to split piece of wood, and split it open in 1,000 pieces, and we're just beginning to learn how to pick them up.
Okay, let's say, to give people an idea, because you and I have both seen a great deal of Hebrew text, so I understand what you're talking about. I'm looking at page 1 here of the Song in the Night, which has a couple of good examples. Do you want to put, you got that on your screen?
I just put it up on the screen here from the Aleppo Codex, the very same thing that I just sang.
Okay, let me put that on. I'm going to put that for people to watch, and then let you kind of explain what's going on here. Because when we talk about all the different accents, people probably don't know what we're talking about.
No, that's quite true. And if you look here, it's a little bit of red ink. It shows you where the accents are. They're circled below and above the text. I'm just pointing at one here that's below the text, and here's another one that's above the text. And that first one, Beni, Beni, ta 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 ti, goes from the tonic to the fifth. That note, the one with the little less than sign, it's actually pointing forward in Hebrew because it's right to left. That is always going to tell you to go to the fifth note of the scale. Now, that is a completely different concept from traditional cantillation in the synagogue. But it is an utterly brilliant concept because it uses information that's in the text itself. Those notes of the scale are always below the text. And the notes or the accents above the text are ornaments. And some ornaments join you forward, and some ornaments separate you, like commas and semicolons. So you can see how people would have got confused about whether it was punctuation or whether it was music. But don't even think punctuation, because music is far, far more expressive than punctuation ever could be. And most people over the last 1,000 years, everybody that I have read, thinks that the accents are confined to a single verse. They are not. They have an impact over multiple verses. They show you how verses are connected and how they are shaped. We saw it in the first example, where the same words were sung on the same melody, but 3 verses apart. We have seen it where 2 psalms are joined by a psalm that begins then the tonic. And I can tell you there are hundreds of examples in the Song in the Night that begin to show you how to pick up the pieces and make music from them.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock, and we're not going to have time to discuss a great deal more. And there's one thing I would like to hear you talk a little bit about before we close this. We'll certainly look at having you back, to talk a little bit more, although I think one of the best things for viewers to do, and this is not just because I'm the publisher and I want you to buy the book, But if you really want to follow up on this, Bob has really put a great deal of information with examples in this book, The Song in the Night. We're looking at pages from it here as he talked, and so that's where to get some information. But I'm particularly interested in hearing you express the importance of studying not just the Psalter, but the Hebrew Scriptures for you as a Christian.
Well, that's a really great question too, and we could spend all night on one of those. Put it in a word, I want to know the kinds of decisions that were made when people chose a particular way of expressing the Hebrew. That's partly me. My daughter would say that's me. And she'd say, well, hasn't the Bible already been translated? And I say, yeah, but I didn't do it. However, it goes deeper than that. There are surprises in every verse. I was just working on Moses' blessing in Deuteronomy 33. And there's a word used in there that is translated, he loved. But the translator hasn't got a clue what it means. Not a clue, because it's not the word for love. It's a word that's only used once in the whole Bible. How are you going to know that word means love? Do you think love is only once in the whole Bible? Whoever did the King James translation just gave up and said, oh, it must mean love. But it doesn't mean love. It means perhaps some kind of inexpressible hope and for humanity that Yahweh, the God of Israel, has, that he wants to express for our growth and our learning and our love. And we're not getting there because we're taking somebody else's word for it. How can we do a translation that isn't a study Bible that you can actually read and that doesn't require you to know all the ancient scribbles, but that will still give you the point that this particular usage is a fascinating and unique usage, and we don't know what it means. Maybe if we think about it, the right questions will occur to us, and some voice from deep within us will express what that is for us and will allow us to do the right thing, as Spike Lee would have said. It's one of the great films, Do the Right Thing, and it's one of the great film titles. And of course, we have to do the right thing. Ultimately, that will be related to love.
Okay. Well, this has been an excellent discussion, and we've left, as you've kind of commented with each question, we've left more on the cutting room floor, so to speak, than we've talked about.
That's sure.
So I think that, but that we are out of time. I'm going to mention again, I've been talking with Bob MacDonald. His two books, Seeing the Psalter and The Song in the Night. And I will emphasize again that The Song in the Night, well, it does relate in many ways to the Psalter, is about so much more. And Seeing the Psalter is specifically the Psalter, and kind of gets you started on this. And even those who do not know Hebrew can benefit from a great deal. I've had a lot of people tell me Seeing the Psalter is worth it for reading the translations without actually knowing the Hebrew. So thanks for being with me tonight, Bob, and we'll look forward to working with you in the future on the projects that we have going.
Okay, well, thanks, Henry. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, good night, everybody. This will be available. I'll be posting on an Energion Discussion Network tomorrow morning.